Hey Saints. Hey Saints. Um, just wanted to come to you today. I had mentioned yesterday being April the 27th, that when we got to John chapter 20, verses I think 22 and 23, where Jesus breathed upon the disciples and said, "Receive the Holy Spirit," that I wanted to come back and talk about that a little bit more because it would kind of that verse helps determine whether you're a pure evangelical or whether you're more charismatic. And so I just slipped my mind. I didn't get to it, so I wanted to come back today and talk about it. So John 20, 22, 23, Jesus breathed on the disciples and they and said, receive the Holy Spirit. So what exactly does that mean? That word breathe on is that's the only place in the New Testament that it's used. But if you look at the Septuagint, and the Septuagint is the Greek translation of the Hebrew Old Testament. It was done by 70 Greek scholars, just thus the word Septuagint, meaning 70, 100, 150 years or so before Christ. They translated the Old Testament Hebrew into Greek. And that word breathed on is the word that is used when God breathed life into Adam. And so it is a significant word, it's a powerful word. And so we need to understand exactly what was going on there. And there's a lot of question about exactly what that means and a lot of discussion on it. And so I wanted to look at that and basically talk about three different possibilities. The first one, just simply that God was releasing in that statement power to them to fulfill the things that they would need to do between that time and the day of Pentecost, which was going to be 50 days later. So it says up there that, or afterwards, that the Holy Spirit, they would receive the Holy Spirit, and whatever sins they retained would be retained, and whatever sins what were forgiven would be forgiven. And so they had a function to do during that 50 days before the day of Pentecost, and he was releasing power to them to accomplish that. That's not a very uh, popular or prevalent uh, belief that that's what he's talking about, but it's worth mentioning, I guess. Number two, explanation number two, is that Jesus said he blew on them, received the Holy Spirit, and when he did that, they were indwelt with the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit came into them 50 days before the day of Pentecost, so that on the day of Pentecost, they already had the Holy Spirit. They were just subsequently being filled with the Holy Spirit, or the popular charismatic terminology is that they were baptized with the Holy Spirit on the day of Pentecost, and they already had the Holy Spirit indwelling in them. So that's the popular charismatic theological belief. The third one is that Jesus breathed on them, said, receive the Holy Spirit. And it was basically a prophetic act or a foreshadowing of what was going to happen on the day of Pentecost. So, in other words, he blew on them, received the Holy Spirit. They did not receive it then, but the command was released. And on the day of Pentecost, 50 days later, they would receive the Holy Spirit. So those are the primary ways that people look at it. Number three, you would be more of a pure evangelical. Number two, you would lean more toward the charismatic side. As for me personally, I lean toward explanation number three, that this was not a release of the Holy Spirit. There's some problems with that I see. Number one, he's only speaking to the people that are in the room right then. There were others who were not in the room. Thomas was not in the room. There were others not there. So what was this just for the people in the room and they were indwelt by the Holy Spirit? Or was this for everybody to be indwelt with the Holy Spirit? It's kind of difficult to think that it would not be for everybody and only for the people in the room. But I guess that would be possible, but that would kind of be awkward. Another reason, and the main reason that I don't go with number two, is that I just don't see the disciples during that 50-day period looking like they have the Holy Spirit within them. And I think the prime example of that is when they decide that Judas Iscariot, who betrayed Jesus, needs to be replaced. And so they go through a way of determining who to select. And when they get down to narrowing it down to two, they cast lots. They roll the dice. Okay, God, if it's this guy. If it's this guy. Kind of rolling the human and the thummim. That was the old covenant, Old Testament way of determining the will of God, and that's the last time in the whole Bible that we see that happening. And I think it's a clear indication if they had the Holy Spirit in them, they would not be rolling the dice to try to figure out who the Holy Spirit was choosing to replace Judas. And so I think it was a prophetic act and foreshadowed what was going to happen in the future 50 days later. So the traditional charismatic theology is that we are indwelt at the time of our conversion, but that there is a subsequent work of the Holy Spirit called the baptism with the Holy Spirit, and that's what we see happening in the book of Acts. If someone were to ask me, when were you converted? I would say October of 1978. And they say, well, when were you baptized with the Holy Spirit? I would say in October 1978, because I believe the baptism with the Holy Spirit happens at the time of conversion. The word baptism speaks of initiation, the first time when we first receive the Holy Spirit. So for me, that's what I would believe. And they say, well, that's strange. When did you speak in tongues? I said, well, I did not speak in tongues until 1984. But that's when I was filled with the Holy Spirit. And that's my theology. And that's actually the terminology that's used in Acts chapter 2. When the Holy Spirit came on the day of Pentecost, it says they were all filled with the Holy Spirit. And there's even in Acts that Luke writes the book of Luke and the Gospel of Luke and Acts, and he has for fullness or filled, he's got different Greek words for the times when they are overshadowed by the Holy Spirit and empowered by the Holy Spirit, and then a different word that just means filled up, like, hey, we filled the cup and it was half full, now it's all the way full and overrunning. And so I believe that's what you see. And so I do go along with the idea that, hey, you get the Holy Spirit, he comes into you at the point of conversion. You can get both. You can have him infilled and overshadowing you at the same time. But traditionally, most often, it's a conversion experience. We're baptized with the Holy Spirit, and then subsequently in the future, at some point, we are filled with the Holy Spirit, and we have the Holy Spirit all along, but it's like we get the Holy Spirit on steroids after that. There's an explosion of power, etc. And that's what I see happening in Acts chapter 1, verse 8. When we receive power, when the Holy Spirit comes upon us, overshadows us, we become witnesses of the fact that Jesus is alive. He's resurrected. We've experienced him. We know him, and we go throughout the world sharing the gospel. So that's I just wanted to kind of clarify that. We'll talk about that probably some more later on in this series that we're talking about from Easter to Pentecost. But it is in today's world, in the American church, there's such division over this whole concept between charismatics and non-charismatics, and my thing that I've told the refuge over and over and over again is we're not going to fight over this. We're not going to divide over semantics. My thing is, I don't care what you call it. I just want you to have it. I want you to be filled, come to Jesus, get filled with the Holy Spirit, get overshadowed with the Holy Spirit, be empowered by the Holy Spirit, receive the gifts, speak in tongues. That's fine. I don't necessarily think that's the only evidence of being filled with the Holy Spirit. I know I was operating in gifts before I ever spoke in tongues. I was a Baptist. I was operating in gifts and just didn't even have a name for what it was I was doing. But I was operating sometimes in prophecy or discerning of spirits or things like that. And got filled with the Holy Spirit later and then experienced even more. But I know Paul, for instance, seems like the first thing that happened to him was a gift for healing. His scales fell off of his eyes. And it doesn't say anything about him speaking in tongues then, although he could have, it just doesn't say. But anyway, my point is we're not going to divide. We're not going to form a new denomination. We're just going to push right through this, but I wanted you to understand some of the theological differences that people have that cause this kind of division. And I just don't want any part of division. So it doesn't matter to me. People, we have both groups at the refuge. We've been blessed in the past. We've had Pentecostals and charismatics and what's called third wave people like us evangelicals that experienced the Holy Spirit and got filled with the Holy Spirit and operating gifts. And that's, that Sharon and I are that part, and others are part of that. And then we've got all the groups, all the streams at the refuge. I think it's awesome. So just wanted to, since I said I would describe that, and I didn't get to it. It slipped my mind. I wanted to go ahead and get that on video and put it out. Probably put this on Facebook and on our YouTube page and get the word out. So there you go. So love you guys. What an awesome thing to belong to Jesus and get to follow him and figure out what he's doing and just be part of the kingdom. And I love you guys. We'll see you soon.